Could have said that. What up, what up, what up? What's going on, everybody? I want to thank you all for joining us here today. I know we had the weather storm come through, but you're still here. We're all here. We're ready to go. We're energized. We're ready to have this conversation. So I want to thank the live studio audience showing up here. Also want to thank the virtual audience that's online for showing up. And we're going to go back and forth between live and the virtual audience here with your questions. We've got Baronessa in the back that will be, she's our creative marketing genius, but she's also moonlighting here as the voice of the people for the virtual audience. Myself, my name is Aloye. I'm one of the solutions architects here with United Alliance. So I'll be your host and your moderator. Today, I'm going to introduce the panelists as well, and let you know a little bit more about them. As well, you also met Kamara Richards. She's running around here somewhere, but she's part of the team. And then you have Dre here, that's also behind the camera and managing the video feeds here. So again, thanks everybody here. Let's get into it. Let's talk about who we have on stage and what we're going to be doing here with Disruptive Seekers. All right. So Greg, we've got Greg Schultz. He's a senior consultant and solutions architect with United Alliance. He embodies the spirit of innovation and community empowerment. Greg has a passion for building operations and improving processes that elevate organizational value, like the Home Depot and Wayfair. It's evident, but Greg's commitment to cultivating community, leading with vision, and driving innovative solutions makes him a leader that inspires leaders to aspire and embrace their potential, find purpose, and make meaningful contributions to their communities and beyond. So Greg is leading our Food Oasis project, amongst other things, as well, one of our initiatives that we'll talk about a little bit more towards the end of this event. Next to Greg, we have Keisha Dennis. Keisha is a Seasons Life coach and founder of Keisha Dennis Coaching and the Elephant in the Room, Inc., a nonprofit dedicated to mental health and wellness advocacy. With over a decade of experience and a gift for connecting with others, she's impacted lives globally. Through her personal journey with wellness, Ms. Keisha has found her purpose in promoting mental health awareness and providing tools for self-help and personal growth. Her work has touched thousands and makes her a beacon of hope for those that seek personal growth and well-being. Thank you. Finally, we have, last but not least, definitely not least, we have Mr. Brian Taylor. He is our co-founder of the United Alliance along with Leon Carell. He stands as a beacon of relational excellence and transformative leadership. His passion for building relationships has been the cornerstone of his 40-plus years of business development, sales, and relationship management. Brian is not just a dynamic relationship engineer connecting people to their purpose, but he's also an educator, a leader, and a cultural refiner dedicated to cultivating meaningful connections that transcend mere transactions. One of his favorite quotes is going from being blown away by the miracle to being the miracle that blows away. We're going to get into this discussion here, but as we do that, before we do that, I just want to connect you to where we were last time. Last time we did talk about Disruptive Seekers. That was our first Disruptive Seekers. This is our second installment of the series. And we talked about what it means to be a disruptive seeker. In fact, the essence of being a disruptor and what it means to be a seeker. What is that exactly? And as a disruptor, we interrupt the world. We force different decisions. We do not align with the status quo. A seeker, on the other hand, strives to be awakened with new knowledge. They look not to rely on the path that is seen, but focus on the vision of the path that's not. So we explored and we cultivated, we explored how we can cultivate a culture of disruption in our own lives, you know, amongst our friends and family and in our organizations. We intentionally disrupt our traditions and routines to truly transform our lives. You know, we all have the potential to be disruptive seekers, but we don't always deliberately and intentionally seek to disrupt. So we here at the United Alliance, we actually emphasize that. How can we be intentional in our transformation and understanding that it's predictable and human? We must be fully conscious and engaged in the necessary actions that require us to achieve our goals, allow us to achieve our goals, but you know, it's really about understanding that success is not something that you stumble into. It's going through these deliberate actions. It's a way of deepening your understanding of the science and the art of this. You know, in the end, as true disruptive seekers, we must shed the risk that keeps us anchored to where we are and venture out to those uncomfortable spaces. It's there where we can realize our true potential. We all got keys at the beginning of this event. Those are representative of the potential that we will unlock. And we're here today as disruptive seekers. We're here to make some decisions in terms of where we go. So we're going to talk about that. But first, talking about the point. What is the point? So, Keisha, I'll have you lead off for us. What's the point? What is a point? What does that mean to you exactly?
Well, for me, I think like a point can mean several different things, right? I feel like a point could be thinking. I feel like, you know,
Yeah.
I'm saying that. No, I think a point, it can be several different things. And I think a point can be a checkpoint, it can be a moment, it can be an opportunity for reflection, an opportunity for alignment. It could be, it can just simply be a point.
Ryan, what do you think about that?
I love what she said. I mean, she talked about it in ways where it's not tangible. You know, like we think about points in our lives, birthdays, walking, geography. Like we all are at a point right now. You know, whether a point in our lives or a location from a point or an age. So that's what I think about it. Just to add to what she said.
Greg, any thoughts?
You know, we mentioned like landmarks could be birthdays, calendar events. I think about it as we go through the year, and I've got 3 kids, you know, a spouse who's also got a full-time career, and you kind of go through the year and you're plotting out the year, and there's a lot of points in that year, and then it actually seems to go by really fast and picks up speed. But there's, as you move through life, there are a lot of points. Some that you like are, you know, you really recognize, but then I think there's a lot that are actually just really surrounding you that you might not in the moment even recognize.
So, yeah. You mentioned something there in terms of moving forward. And I think it's a perspective that I gained as we discussed points, pivots, and portals earlier. Sometimes you see it as a fixed point, a fixed place. But when you think about Keisha, like a birthday, a marker, it's a representation of something in the past, but it also represents where you're going in the future. You actually move through that. There's a dimension to that. It's really interesting to think about these points in time. Curious from the audience, there's any thoughts on this, any examples of points that you would enjoy?
I'll say for me, like, coming from out the military, how that point I'm ready to move on. And it's like a transition from one area to another. Because you also pick on things that you learned during that time, and then when you're ready to move on to the next, whether it's a vision or whether you have a passion for, whatever the case may be, it's like you move from that point to another point in your life where, you're trying to target or move on to that something that you want to do or something that needs to be done, whether it's taking care of your daughter or somebody in your family member or career-wise, whatever the case may be. So I look at that from that perspective, moving on to something else when you use the word point. So David, I love what you said, and you're also segueing into the next word we're going to discuss, but I just want to,
I love that too.
Ms. Kim, you had your hand raised.
Oh, yes, I was looking at the terms in there, how they break it down. I like that part where it says, emphasize our attention to take and acknowledge something greater. Because when I first heard that word point, I thought of purpose. Like you might say, what's the point? What's the purpose? And so, it sounds like you're naming those points and those purposes and families and everybody like all together.
I like that. It's like an acknowledgement point. Maybe a time, maybe a point where it may be an opportunity for us to slow down, or a point for us to just embrace where we are and not necessarily move, make a decision really, really quickly, but I like what Bookie said.
Any other thoughts there? David, definitely love what you were saying there too, in terms of
just to add on what she said, like, what's the point? Because a lot of times we in situations where you don't realize why you're doing it, but some reason you have to just sit still or just try to understand, like, why you're at this point. Sometimes you got to go through those journeys just to realize that point that you're going through. And then you're like, oh, okay. Now I realize the point, because sometimes you're not going to understand that point when, like, when she's talking about what's the point. Somebody could be helping you or setting you up for success down the line because they've been through it, or it could just be a thing. It might not even be a person, it could be a thing. So, look at that one too.
for sure.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that, as you talk about your career, the point in your career where you're transitioning out of the military, this is examples of, like, it's crossroads, right? There's sometimes there's different directions you can take in that one point, right? So,
I was going to say, the other thing on the definition, I think you mentioned the word was focus. Like, these are the things that you do focus on. And it gives you some focus, and you may be able to see, like it mentions, like acknowledging something greater. But it actually, when you're cognizant of those points, it's something that you're focused on. And so I think that's like a key word that we'll continue to discuss as the evening wears on.
Yeah.
I want to check in with the virtual audience. Do we have any questions yet? If you do have any questions, definitely drop them in the chat, and we'll get them out here. Any comments?
Keisha has.
I think y'all made a really good point, but it also made me think about made a good point. Okay. Personally, when I was on my drive here, I was just thinking, and for the last, just full transparency, for the last few months, I've just been trying to discern, and I've been like, I felt like, okay, I'm getting to a point where maybe I need to check in with God. I want to make sure that I'm being obedient, and I want to make sure that I'm focused And I want to make sure that I'm working in my gift the way that he wants me to work in my gift. And so sometimes, out of all honesty, you know, you get frustrated, and I'm like, well, you know, what is it? What is it? And I realize, you know, it's a moment to be still for me, so that I can listen clearly. And I heard myself saying a couple months ago, like, I feel like I'm at a point in my life, like that was all I kept saying. I think I'm at a point in my life where I think I want to do this, or I think I want to do that. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to pray about it and move whenever he tells me to move. And so I think by focusing on or considering point in that perspective, that's kind of what, I don't know, it resonates with me.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking of an example too, that was powerful leading up to today, it was yesterday, leading into today, or today, yesterday or today. But to the point, I was on the train, and I was wearing one of my jackets, and it had my arm on it, right? And a young looked up and he said, "Can I take a picture?" And I'm like, there's a point to this. I know it's bigger and I'm not seeing it right now, like you're saying, not necessarily seeing it immediately. But on site, he was putting together his own art with the photo he had taken, and then I seen what he did with it, share his own art. And so that was just a point that share that example of not really
It became a
going to-
bigger picture.
Yes, it's then even still, there's more alignment that there's still more points to that point, right?
Right, and I think it's fair to say that it's multiple points. Yeah.
Yes, Tamika.
Yes, so, in line with the definition of point, we have to acknowledge that it is a verb, so that means it's an action. So we are doing things inside that point of reference or point of time or wherever we are, we're actioning on what we want to focus on and what we want to reference. So I want to make sure that that point was
Like that.
So life is full of points. Let's take a minute, a few seconds, to think about an upcoming point in your own life. For me, it's pretty easy. I have one coming up in about 2.5 weeks. I'll be getting married. Thank you. Shameless plug. She's in the virtual audience. But I think about that, and I think about the transition that's going to happen through that point. And I also think about the focus and the attention that that point calls upon you. So you have that. I want to move to
No.
Dre.
Jay?
I don't know, we might be getting ahead of ourselves. Do I need a microphone?
No, you don't.
I don't need a microphone. I'm gonna say that marriage, you might consider that a portal.
But let's move to pivots actually as we
So let's
discuss the
pivot.
point. Let's pivot off of points. And there's a question here. In terms of the pivot around the point, those pivotal moments that require a decision. We talked about the crossroad, we talked about how a point is got dimensions to it. What are some of those critical decisions in your life, those pivotal moments? And what has that, the point that's centered around?
That's what
Kamara can answer.
Well,
Okay.
I was thinking for me, joining UA kind of like was a point, and having been purposing at UA and realizing the need to make a decision to embrace that leadership focus, that leadership spirit. That's for me was a pivot in terms of how are you showing up as a leader, what are those characteristics, how do you lead others, influence, etc. That for me was a pivot point since being here at UA.
So a career transition that also was in terms of maybe the role that you took on previously and now the new role that you're taking on.
Yes. And embracing that and believing that yes, I can be that leader that others, see me was important. So that belief that I can achieve this and being determined to continue on that path when I take that path.
Thank you, Mark. Brian.
No, I was gonna ask, Tequila, is it Tequila? Tequila.
Yeah.
What do you think when you see the word pivot?
You know what? Funny that you said that. I really like that word.
Uh-huh.
And I'm gonna tell you about a moment that I had to deal with. My background is healthcare administration.
Okay.
I was running the ER during COVID,
Oh, wow.
and so I was given an ultimatum, right, to take the vaccine or lose my job. At that point in time, I walked off my job. I hurried up. That was a pivotal moment that actually introduced me into entrepreneurship. So I had to pivot.
Yeah.
All I knew was healthcare, right?
Right.
And so that allowed me to reassess my situation. All right? And so when I think about point, it's almost like a reassessment to see my destination, where I'm going, am I on track?
Right.
So I love that word. That was a pivotal moment for me.
Greg, any thoughts? Pivot?
On an example of a pivot?
Example of
I mean, that was a good one, and Kamara mentioned it too, from a career perspective. You're making a decision to go one direction or the next. Sometimes it feels like it happens to you, right? You're like, I wasn't necessarily planning on having to make this decision right now, or you have a short time frame. Sometimes, you might be planning for it for a bit or that kind of thing, but you come to essentially a fork in the road, and you have to decide which way you're going to go, and then you make your best determination in terms of all the information you have, and you might be well connected to your purpose. You may not be, but you're at a point where you have to say, I've got to go this direction or that direction.
So I want to even connect. So David, you mentioned, being in the military and then being out of the military. Tequila, I'll get it right tonight. Okay. You mentioned having, so yours was a decision you knew that at some point in time you were going to make. Yours was forced upon you, and I even go back to when I think about that whole space, right? We have points, and I'm still kind of stuck. I'm gonna be transparent. I was thinking about point in a noun, but it's also a verb, so you brought up a good point, Tamika, and I think both descriptions of the word, it's appropriate. But, so when we think about pivot, there are pivots that we know are coming, point you made, David. Then there are pivots that we have to make a decision about, and so when you put it together, sometimes you're present to it, sometimes you're not, but you have to get to a point and you say, you know what, either I'm going to go right or I'm going to go left. And then there's a lot of energy in that, because I was speaking with, I believe, Sean earlier, and we were talking about, being from Detroit, and that's a point, and understanding that the same energy that makes you successful in Detroit will make you successful wherever else you go. Now, understanding that you can't bring, and you used a great example, Sean. He said sometimes people from Detroit come to Atlanta and not be successful because they keep a Detroit mindset, right? So I'm gonna connect this. I know y'all looking at like, how'd I get there? But, so even in that space, so it's about being able to move from one point and realize the environment has transformed. So now I gotta pivot, whether I know I'm gonna have to pivot or whether I'm forced to pivot. And so in doing so, it's life changing. Even as you mentioned, Kamari, you know, what a tremendous example. Not only did you have to pivot in terms of career, but also country. So, you know, all these things. And so I want to, as we continue on in the discussion, I want to talk to the energy around that pivot. Because that, in my opinion, makes the difference on the success or not the success. So.
I really agree with what you just said. One of the main words that Ryan brought up was transform. And a lot of times these like pivotal moments require us to transform. And we use these moments to make us, I mean, I'm sure most of us want to elevate or to better ourselves, whether that be our business, whether that be our personal lives. And to do so, we have to pivot and change direction. And sometimes with that pivot, you either have to change your thought process, you have to change your mind, or you have to change yourself. So I think like transformation is a really great word because that's what it requires to do. So I just wanted to like take that out.
I'd like to throw another word out there also. You made me think about that. Your story did as well as yours. And I think we put a lot of emphasis on the actual pivot, and I'm sure we've all had to pivot in life in general, but does the vision change? Right? So sometimes, like for me, I know the vision, and I understand the vision. I don't necessarily know which direction or what route I'll be taking, but I know I'll get to where I'm going. And of course, during that time, I'll have to pivot, but that never changes my vision.
So Keisha, are you saying that in those times when you pivoted, but your direction, your vision didn't change, were you going in a direction that didn't get you there? Is that why you had to make that pivot?
Not necessarily. I don't think so. I think the vision that I have, so for instance, I'm always like, I have a gift. I connect with people, I want to impact people, and my vision at the end of the day is to have impact. That's all I care about. But in the direction that I'm going, I may feel as though, all right, I'm going to impact this many people. Let's say I'm like, you know what, I'm going somewhere where there's 1,000 people. However, something allowed me to get to a point where I had to pivot because there were 1 million people that I needed to impact. And so that's why I said the vision doesn't change, but maybe my path that changes.
Keisha, can you speak to, so in preparation for the discussion, there was some, let's just say, a bit of just walking through the concepts. There was something that we touched with respect to the internal versus the external. Mm-hmm. And so even what you're talking about with respect, does the vision change? Something that Greg said is like at times at those pivot points, it can seem like things are happening to us from the external lens. The pivot can also be internally, is like making the switch from it's happening to us, it's happening to us, it's really happening for us, is almost what I'm hearing you speak to. So I don't know if you want to kind of like piggyback on that internal, external struggle and what that looks like in that pivotal moment.
Yep, because again, we might think that something is happening to us, but it's actually happening for us. And it could mean, I think in the discussion that we were having, environmental factors, outside, things like our environment, the people that we're around, our current situations, that may have an impact on our destination or where we meet at the point. And I want to say, when we mentioned this, I think we discussed it.
We were discussing in terms of family. Relationships, but the key takeaway from it all was really our mindset.
That it's happening for you instead of to you.
Instead of to you.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
I mean, because during those discussions, when we're thinking about where we're going, first of all, you have to envision yourself already being there. The plan is written down. Every single day, if you say, I'm going to be a billionaire, you have to really believe it. And of course, things happen in outside noise. You have family members. For instance, you have a football player, basketball player, and they say, well, I want to be able to give back to my community. I want to make it to the NBA or the NFL. And I want to be able to give back to my community. However, senior year of college, season a career-ending injury. Does that stop him from impacting his community?
Right.
Right, it doesn't, but it could if his mindset was like, well, it's over for me. I won't be able to do it anymore because you're focused on the destination. Like, I have to do it this way, in this particular direction. I have to make it to the NFL, the NBA, in order to do what God has worded for you. And that's not necessarily the case. You have to, it's the mindset.
And even to that point, to add on to that, it's also in the space of problems, if we have the right mindset, are actually just merely opportunities. Mm-hmm. So in that instance, it's like, okay, the professional, sports player, whatever they were, they thought that they were going to get to this route and impact X, however many lives, but really, if they took the opportunity, they could actually have a greater impact in embracing wherever they're at and the opportunities that are actually shifting them in a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Greg, I'm gonna use what you like to use and say all the time, so we're making this tangible.
Okay.
Because I'm feeling what you all are saying here, Keisha and Baronessa, around the internal pivot that we face. And so what I heard you saying is, an example of that is your mindset. When you're going through those points, what is your mindset that gets you to that vision? And sometimes you have to change your mindset from where you are today to achieve the success that you're looking for as you move through that point. Anybody have an example of that? Like a real example of where they've experienced it. They changed their mindset. Ron, I know you got one. Rob, I see Rob.
Yeah.
From the beginning question, what I heard was choices, right? That's what kept coming up. In other words, are pivot and what's the other one? Point. So, but I mean, they're the recipe that makes up your choices. Your mindset is how you look at things, your perspective. I think they all are, like when we look at where we want to be, they all are choices that we make depending on, because something makes up a point that you outwardly execute that causes you to make a choice on what you do. And if you have to pivot, it's still a choice that you make from somewhere, right, to determine where you want to be at. So for me, it was going to church. I was ripping and running the streets, out here a lot, doing some things that I shouldn't be doing. But I made a choice to serve God, right? And my life completely changed, right? Because I looked at where I wanted to be. I looked at my legacy. I looked at how my lineage was going to take the things that I do as me being an example, and then how, like, the points in their life that they would experience with me, how it impacted them, and everybody around us. So I made those choices to pivot, and that's my thing.
Thank you, Rob. Amazing example. Brian, what do you have for?
Oh, no, I mean, this is so pregnant with examples. Tequila, she had a great example. David had a great example. And I think this was one of the points that you brought up as well when we were on the call, is that a lot of times we have these points that we are not present to. So that also means you're not present to the pivots either. Sometimes mindset says, I'm going to do something different, but body says, no, I'm going to do the same thing. How many times have we I know this is not it, but I'm going to do this because I've always done that. So we get to a point of pivot, but we don't actually pivot. It's the mindset that says, you know what? Nah, this time instead of going right, I'm going left. And even though I believe my vision, as you brought up, Keisha, is this way, whether it be football, basketball, donating to the community, and all these things, it's about readjusting the mindset and saying, I still can do that. Maybe I don't go right to do that, now I go left. How many times do we sit and we think, like, yeah, this is not it. We either feel it inside or externally, and we refuse to move in the pivot. What happens when you refuse to move in the pivot, or you have the wrong perception of what the pivot is? Because I thought about this last week. A lot of times we are anchored to a point. We think we're pivoting, but actually we're just moving within the realm of what we're anchored to. It's not until we let go of that point and we accept it that we actually truly pivot. Because if I'm anchored to the center and I can have length, all I'm gonna do is go in a circle. You know, but when I break that anchor and truly pivot and understand that maybe my way of helping the community is not found in football or basketball, I can break away from that and say, well, there are other ways I can help. Like you said, I was thinking about helping thousands, but maybe it's really millions. So in that space, that's.
You made another good point. It made me think about I have one story, but then also when it comes to mindset, and you said that, you know, it's just a lot of motion.
Yeah.
I think mindset plays a lot into that motion, because there was always this saying where just because you have motion, it doesn't mean you're moving forward. And I think now, especially in the era of social media, a lot of people want to look and pretend like they're doing something. It looks like motion. It looks like the accolades, but you're not really moving forward. And that's mentally. Your mindset is fixated on the attention that you're getting and not necessarily your vision. You're like losing sight of it. And the story that I had, really briefly, so I graduated from Georgia State University, and I went there before all the commons, all the apartments. In the middle of the area, there were a lot of homeless people that lived there. And I'm very friendly. So I'm walking to class one day, and at some point you kind of get used to seeing the same people there, and I'm speaking to them every single day. If I have some lunch, you know, they're asking, sure, here you go. One day I decided to sit down and I talked to this lady, and she said her name was Janet. And so Janet used to always talk all the time, and she would mention that she had a buddy. I never got the guy's name, but she said, yeah, he's often to himself all the time. You know, maybe one day you should just kind of talk to him too. So didn't think anything of it up until like maybe a couple weeks later. I walk by, I see the young man, and we ended up having a conversation. And I've always been curious to know people's story. I always want to know where they are, how they've gotten to where they are currently, where they plan on going. And he told me that he made thousands of dollars. He was a very successful man at some point in his life. And he says that he was married, he had children, he worked at this job, but then suddenly his wife was diagnosed with cancer. He said it broke him completely. He said, I didn't really know what to do. I know I needed, my wife at this time had to go through chemo. She had to have all these different appointments. He said, but it's very difficult for me because my children, they're too young, they can't really help or anything. But I know that I need to make the appointments, but my job is really giving me a hard time. He says, so it got to a point where his job was harassing him, not having any regard for his wife's health. And they're telling him, hey, listen, you're slacking on your job. You need to, you know, step it up. I understand you have things going on at home, but we have priorities here. And so he says that it got really difficult for him at work and at home, and he had to make a really, really tough decision. And on one end, he said that he stuck it out of his job because of the insurance. His wife needed the treatment. But then on the other hand, he said, I couldn't take it anymore, Keisha. He left the job to take care of his wife, to take her to the appointments up until the insurance and whatever financial assistance ran out. He says, my wife ended up passing away. His wife died, and then he says from that point on, I didn't care about anything anymore. I don't care about the dollar. I didn't care about anything. My children, they moved on. I kind of just got into a slump. And I said, well, how did you end up getting here? And he said, I gave up. So I completely gave up. And there were opportunities for me at he didn't say these terms, but I'm thinking about this story now. There were opportunities at different points for him to pivot. But one thing he did say was, I said, well, what do you think could have changed this? He said, my mindset. And so I say that to tie into sometimes at those pivotal moments, it might mean it might be uncomfortable, or it might mean we have to make some different type of sacrifices. Now, when it comes to the love of his wife, we don't know where he is. And I'm thinking about also the conversation that he and B-Dub had about your environment and your family. It's so many things that goes into play with the decisions that you make, but it all boils down to your mindset.
Thank you.
I think the both of what they were just saying, the perfect transition before, because really what you both are speaking on starts to go into the portal space. Because to your point, if I think about it, the basketball playing this pivot. Well, pivot, you're acknowledging the directions. That don't mean you actually are lifting up to go the actual next direction. So the pivot, you can actually get in a pivot and take the motion, take the action you have to take. But that doesn't mean to your point you're actually doing anything. So the mindset part is what is really attention. Support.
They say we're transitioning. We're pivoting to the board. You all, I mentioned the keys that you have. And there were questions that came along with that key. In those questions, we talked about measuring your potential on a scale of 1 to 10. Whatever your number was, how many had 10, by the way? Whatever your number was, keep your hand up. Everybody up. The second question asked, are you realizing that full number, that full potential? Put your hand down if that number is different. So we've got a few of that. They had a number, and they're maximizing that. They're hitting that number. My question, and this third question that was on there, is around why aren't you maximizing your number, your potential? And it leads into the discussion that was just happening and what happened when we moved forward. So, what is a portal? Right.
So, this is going to be an imperfect visual, but when we started talking about this, did you guys ever play Chutes and Ladders or Candyland when you were kids? And, you know, and it's actually relatively simple, and so, but I was just thinking about that this image came into my mind. It's an imperfect visual, I'll say in a second, but, you know, little different color boxes on there, they're essentially like points, you know, they're like points. And in those games, you also come to points where, you come to pivots. Like you had, am I going to go to the right or the left, and that kind of thing. And you have to make a decision. You're trying to get to the end of the board. You're trying to beat your brother or sister or your friend to get there. And that's that's the objective. And you got to decide, am I going to go right or left? And that's sort of like the path you're taking. And then once in a while, you get to a point where you land on something that you can go from all the way down to the bottom of the board, all the way up to the top of the board. And I actually think of that as like the portal. Like, and we mentioned mindset, and that's all well and good. Like, hey, I'm just going to change my attitude, but it's more than a change in attitude. It's really an understanding, and we talked about transformation. I think you said you liked transformation before, which is absolutely right. You're transforming yourself, and you're going to a different plane. So it's not only are you just taking different steps, and I've got to I need to get 100 or 1,000 squares just to get all the way to the top. You get to a point where when you go through the transformation, you come to a point in time, and again, it's more than just a pivot. You're able to go to a different place, and it allows you to. And again, there's a knowledge and an understanding, and you're able to make that move and go to a whole different place in your life. And as we talk about potential, that's like you're not only at a 10, you're at a 12. Like you're at places where you can do things now that you've never done before. So I'll stop there. But that was like kind of. I've always just keep thinking about the game, like it's a simple game. Oh, the other piece though, before I finish, is like those games, why it's imperfect is because you're just rolling the dice and you're kind of getting there and then you're getting to move up. There's no luck involved in this. It's really about, it's really about a transformation that you're doing intentionally to get to a place where you can take yourself to a different plane.
So like, popped up in my head, portal is like the moment where it's like, once you always think about external, internal, so when the internal, external both exist with each other, it's like they're moving for each other, but they both align with each other. So he was talking about marriage, so that just made me think like that's a moment in time where you're dealing with a point pivot before all that comes out. So you get to the point after where you walk up to it there, and you're making a pivot. You're making a decision in your head, even in that moment, like, am I about to really do this? Am I really about to really do this and stuff? But it's when you say, I do, when you walk away, you start really living that what is external and internal actually love each other. That's important. On my parents, man, like, portals on that internal, external, meet each other.
Thank you, Dre. You said I'm getting ready to jump into the portal.
But hold on, Dre. You said something. You said that a portal is when your internal and your external are in the mind. I struggle with that a little bit because of the fact that sometimes an external isn't. It may not be aligned. It may not ever be aligned. But it's in the space of sight versus vision, where you have to believe it's aligned, whether or not it is. If that makes sense, because oftentimes they may not ever match, because as you progress, as those benchmarks move, you get what I'm saying? Because you're like, we're to the rest of the panel, like that vision just becomes more expansive as you grow. So with that being said, they may not ever actually be in line, but to go through that portal, it just requires a certain level of like ridiculous belief that the things around us are something other than they are, and your behaviors reflect that despite the external. You have thoughts?
I wish we had a more expensive definition, but basically, yeah, it's like, so,
I wanted to share something, I think will kind of tie everything together that my pastor spoke about.
What's your name?
Kiasi. About a month ago, that kind of brings pivot and portal together, where I'll use an example as a butterfly. This is what he used. So when you're a caterpillar, like kind of what you two were saying, you're a caterpillar that's at one point in your life. And when you were talking about being attached to that anchor and moving in a circle, right? You're moving but not really doing anything. And as a caterpillar, you might modify yourself where you become a faster caterpillar, but you're still going in that same circle. You're still not moving anywhere. But then when you get into that cocoon, that's your portal right there. You're getting into the portal as a cocoon. And to bring your point in with the external distractions, or what you might think in your mind, you still have to have that belief. You might be stagnant in that portal, in that cocoon, but you have to believe that God is working on you. He's still working on you. You might not feel like anything's going on, but it's because you're transforming and you're pivoting. So then, and then to bring what Greg was saying as far as getting to the next level, now you come out of that cocoon as a butterfly. So now you have wings to get to that next level that you might not have been able to get to as a caterpillar. So you have to go through that portal, you have to pivot, and you have to transform just to be able to reach the next level. And you can't listen to anything outside, you have to have that belief, like what you all were saying. So, I mean, I use this example all the time because I think it was just like a really great example. It opened my mind a lot. And he said it in a time where I was transforming, I was pivoting and changing my mindset and having to do things just totally differently, just outside the box. I just started coming to stuff like this. I'm 28 years old. I just started going to events like this last week. You know what I mean? And I've been to like 10 since then, literally. And it's helping and it's working. Yeah, like so. I mean, I just wanted to share that example with everyone because I feel like it ties everything together.
I love that.
I love that.
Yeah, really good. We talk a lot about butterflies, Brian.
Yeah, we do. Just to add to what you said, just a point of thought for all of us, does the caterpillar even realize it's a butterfly?
Right.
No, does it realize it's a caterpillar or realize it's a butterfly?
It's a butterfly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't realize that it's actually a butterfly going through points to a pivot, just anchoring from the pivot, going into the portal where it was on the ground, now it looks down to the multiplication effect that we see when you go through the portal. Going
Right.
from a 10 to a 12 or 3 to a 12, whatever that is. So yeah, that's phenomenal.
So Brian, are you saying, are you saying that our potential, if we only see our potential as a caterpillar, we don't recognize the butterflies that we are? If we see ourselves as a 5, we can never be the 10 that we are actually are.
Yeah.
Or you can see, you don't recognize that you don't look at what you really see. I've been working with that a lot. Where with is other people's greatness. Because say if I went through a fast track or something, and then now I met another person and I'm seeing that this is happening with them, but they're not seeing it. But I'm able to recognize it. And I kind of feel like they were at 10 and so they stood in and they're not seeing the impact that's really being made.
That's right. Well, one of the things that that is super important for anybody is that they're part of a community and other people who can actually help them see. We're always going to have blind spots, and so, they need you to be able to say, like, hey, no, you're really up here. That could get them going. That helps them change their mindset. So the community aspect of that is vital. You have something to say, Jerry?
I just know the way you brought the community aspect back into it, right? So just the whole concept of, pivots and portals, right? Points, pivots and portals. But then how does that bubble up and feed into something bigger and greater? And that's kind of where I see the community aspect coming in and, bringing it all together. We're all 10s, butterflies, whatever analogy you want to use. But, we can be better if we're together. We can accomplish more together as opposed to individually.
Said it the whole time, so my understanding of this whole portal concept, I'm kind of been listening in, just kind of getting my own perspective. But from what I hear, it's more like you realizing of your capacity and passion, because at every level there's another level. That's my biggest understanding of it. Like one book I read called Mama Mentality about Kobe Bryant was talking about how there were different levels to the game, and you could be the best at this level, but to get to the next level, you had to cross over to some sort of plateau. A lot of times you get stuck there. Like me specifically, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and my specific environment wasn't conducive for my growth. A lot of my friends were doing things that, when I stepped out and showed them something different, they'll laugh at me. They'll joke with me. They're like, oh, man, you doing that? You dancing now? You singing now? You doing all these other things, but you're not doing what's normal and regular for us, right? So it wasn't cool in my culture. So for me to step outside of that, I had to go to a different environment. So when you guys talk about portals, points, and y'all say portals, points, and pivots. Yeah, portals, points, and pivots. I say I had to pivot at each level in order to get to the portal, which will be the plateau of my capacity. So whether I'm here now, and I had to learn, hey, I'm stuck in this mindset. I want to be a business owner because anybody that's successful in my family was a business owner. If I want to reach that level of success, there's no way I can go down the same path everybody else went down. So I have to change that. But that's just my understanding.
Do you mind me asking a personal question?
No problem.
What do you think, what did you do growing up in Memphis? I've been in Memphis, and every time I fly into Memphis, I'm always like, oh my goodness, I'm talking to my Uber drivers, and they share the same stories. What do you think you did different, or what advice would you give someone else in that same environment, facing adversity, to get it where you are?
Honestly, I would say don't be so caught up in what people around you think, because that was very difficult for me. You gotta think about this. I was in college. All the guys that I was in college, they was like, man, we trying to talk about girls, man. That's not cool. You need to be doing this. And I'm sitting around, I'm stuck in this environment, and I started realizing, man, I'm trying to impress these people around me in this environment and everything, and I'm not even being who I want to be. You know, I like to read. I like to go do a little nerd stuff. I like to dance. I like to do that kind of stuff. And they would laugh at me for stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I had to step outside of my comfort zone and be like, you know what? And now 5 years down the line, I look at these same people and everything, and they impressed by me. They sitting around like, man, Amir, can you show me how to do this? Amir, can you show me how to do that? And everything. I'm sitting around like, man, look, my life was no different from your life. I just made a different decision to accept the fact that there are different cultures in the world that you can check out. There are different people in the world that you can be comfortable being around. Instead of, hey, I'm black, I gotta hang around black people. That's it. I want to be around the Asian people. I want to be around the Jewish people. I want to be around the Middle Easterns. I want to be around everybody and get different perspectives. I even picked up Latin dancing and stuff, bro. Like, I want to learn how to dance. You know? So that was me though. And if I talk to my friends now, they actually came with me, they would have been laughing at me. So now I'm in this island by myself, but I got a new environment of different people that I'm around that accept who I am and what I want to be. So that's like something I had to change.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
You saw, but you had a bigger picture. I don't even know if you had the vision at that point. You may have developed that, but you could sense like a bigger picture. It sounds like, right? That your friends were getting in it, and like you kind of see, like, yeah, you know, you're into that too for a while, but then you're like, there's something else that I gotta be doing.
I mean, like, yeah, like this, you going to school, and yeah, I know what's going on in school and everything. All that kind of stuff. We having a good time partying and stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking like, man, okay, well, so what's next? You know, if you don't have internships, you don't have a job, right? Nobody's trying to focus on getting internships. So I'm looking at here all the perspective. 86% of the kids getting out of school aren't even getting in the career field that they're supposed to get into, right? So if I already know those statistics and everything, and I'm trying to make my life different, who am I talking to? Who do I have to show me the way? Because there wasn't a lot of people in my family that could show me how to be a business owner. I was like, I had one uncle, and he used to tell me all the time, man, well, I worked a lot of jobs, but I was always focused on reading and learning more about business and being around other business owners, and that's what helped me to run my business. So I was like, I can do the same thing.
Super incredible.
But here's the thing that I think about too, like, you know, it's like, oh great, portals. I mean, you need to go through a transformation to go through the portal to get to somewhere else. You're like, oh, well, okay, that sounds great. How do we do that? You know, like, it's. I mean, there's understanding that is necessary. There is like there are specific things you need to do. So I just want to enter that in because it's a really good conversation that we're having, right? In terms of like understanding the points and then the pivots and then getting into the portals. So that is a good frame, and now it's like diving into like, okay, how do we go through that transformation? Baronessa.
This is coming from the chat from Tyler. Sometimes what lies on the other side of the portal is already there. Your path is to get you there. Your pivot usually realigns you back to the path of the portal. Just wanted to share that. I don't know if anyone ever read The Alchemist, but that reminds me of this, where it's like you go searching around the world for the very thing that was like in your backyard, really within you the whole time.
Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I'm gonna say
Sarah?
something. I remember a few years back, the movie Limitless came out, and it was like really profound to me. It was just about like watching this person who went through had these different points in his life, and he was at a different place, and he was introduced to something that kind of gave him an ability to pivot his life and change his life, and he was stuck on this different thing, and he kind of continued using this thing to kind of help get him to a different place. But what was profound to me was like, what is stopping me from becoming that person? Like, you don't necessarily need a drug. The drug was just amplifying his mind to do different things that he was able to do. And so what I did was I self-reflected, like, all right, what are the different things I need to do to kind of get myself to a different level? I started thinking about people like Stephen Hawking and all these other, these amazing people that got to different levels. And what was I doing that was kind of holding me back? So like when you gave me the question, like what about potential? Yeah. And like I said, like I know I'm nowhere near my potential because my potential is always going to continue growing. And so it was, for me, it was like, all right, what do I need to do? What are the things that are getting in the way from me? What was the pitch for me? And so I thought about some of those different things. And what I realized was like there was distractions, a lot of different things that was noise that were talking about, different things that kept on getting in the way. And so as I started to like, hey, I need to start dedicating more time to this, I started talking about and limiting the distractions around me, I was able to kind of start moving in a more positive way, and I was able to start to see different levels and then entering into these different portals by introducing myself to different people because I had made these shifts and different pivots along the way. So I think overall, it was all profound. It kind of helped because it's just about changing your mind state and then changing where your focus is and how do you get there.
I think just to kind of close it out a little bit, and I love what you talked about, Greg, how is it practical? So when I think about the first one, which is a point, realizing that a point is just that, and you get to choose if it is a point that's a moment in time or a timeless moment. You get to choose. That's the first thing. So you were at a point, and you had to make a decision. You were at a point, you had to make a decision. And then when you move from that point to the pivot, it is also being present to the fact that in the pivot, if you keep your eye on the vision, that although I may have to go in a different direction, it's okay because the vision is what it is. And instead of going left, I got to go right, I'm going to do that. So once you hit a point and you decide that you're going to pivot, then you got to still say, I still can accomplish my vision going in this direction. You got to have that confidence, that self-belief. And then thirdly, be patient enough and focused enough as you pivot, but don't pivot in a space of just motion. Really break the anchor that you are pivoting from so that you enter the portal and then expect and believe and receive that there's going to be an opening of tremendous opportunities. I keep looking at you because you did that. You did that, and your life will never be the same. You did that, David. Your life will never be the same. Rob, you've done it. We've all done it in so many different ways. Now, Amir, you said something that was so profound that I don't know if we even caught it, but you mentioned levels. So we go through this whole process, point, pivot, portal. And the key to it is not just to arrive at that point or in that space. Then you go to you do it all over again. And imagine, so limitless, and you just said it as well, Sam, it's like I realized that my potential, I hit one point in my potential, but there was so much more to go. And in that space, we are limitless. But it's in recognizing that this is a point. We have power to pivot, not just pivot, then go through the portal, and then achieve what we want to achieve. And then from there, do it all over again. But it's about being present to it and realizing that we get to make these choices every day.
Right. Yeah, we apply this, right? We apply this every day. It's a challenge for all of us here, but that's an awareness. Recognize that we can apply points, pivots, portals, and the actions that are needed, the mindset that is needed to take you from one plateau to the next. when we talk about it in terms of atmospheric thinking.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm gonna say, like, you mentioned the word application, is like, this is what we do, and there's a few new faces. A lot of you we've seen before, but this actually is what we do. We do this in the business sense, so we are a for-profit company. We do consulting services, financial services, education, but we're really, for us, it's about building community, and so that's why we have these discussions. So just some of that context. But we know that applying these concepts, which are very personal, this is how companies can, this is how companies grow too, and this is how they can perform well. And so this is what we actually spend time all day, every day, working on just how you actually do these things and like how you take these steps. And we bring these with our clients and apply them. And we've had good results. So that, I didn't really mean that to be just a shameless plug, but just provide that context in terms of, we think it's important to build community, and we do that through business. But it's the communities and people being able to transform, they in turn actually, will actually then create thriving businesses as well. So anyway,
Greg, can you share on that point, because we're rounding out the hour. Can you share a little bit about the food oasis?
Oh, yeah, sure. You got the slide back there. So, again, I mentioned that we're for profit, but we're a purpose-based organization. Like, we aren't doing this just to make money. It's important for us to achieve purpose, and again, that for us that is really building community with a capital C. We think about it as the UA community and getting people around these concepts. But as we were kind of setting our goals at the beginning of the year, we talked about, like, hey, this is how much revenue that we're going after. We got to create this many relationships to drive our business. We also wanted to go after a purpose that didn't have a client necessarily. Maybe it'll turn into a client someday. But we talked about what is that problem that we can solve. And in Atlanta, as we probably all know, Atlanta has one of the worst issues with food deserts. People via income inequality and issues with like transportation are just really a distance from nutritious food, and so it's really a practical issue and a big issue for Atlanta. So we decided, hey, we're going to apply our principles to solve the issue of food deserts and create food oases in Atlanta. So we're taking the steps now to engage with people around the city council, city planning, people who run urban farms. We see this as being we need to bring businesses together with civic agencies, government agencies. We do need philanthropy involved as well, and educational institutions, because we can't just drop stores in places and expect that the issue will be solved. Even if you drop a store in a place, there's still a lot of issues that need to be addressed, right? So, anyway, we're starting to bring folks together who have an interest, and they have an interest in solving it and ideas and that sort of thing, and we're guiding them through using UA principles to do so. So we're admittedly on the front end of this, but we actually have had a lot of really good engagement from some people who matter, and we've had some revelations as well. So what we're going to do, like, we're focusing in on the city of Atlanta now, because the city of Atlanta has that issue. But our problem, like what we're going to solve, we're going to scale this to other places. And so as we think about portals and points and pivots, we're going to create food aces. Like, we're confident that we're going to solve this issue. And like, we know that we can solve the issue. And as I mentioned, bringing all these different people and groups together, that's the community that needs to solve it. We're not just going to solve it with just a few people. But we're gonna be the spark that actually that drives it, and we're gonna provide the guidance to do it. So again, in terms of going to a different plane, like we're using these principles that are going to allow us to transform into a place where we're going to solve this issue and scale it to beyond just the city of Atlanta. So that's all.
Thank you.
And if you guys have, go ahead. I'll just pass it back to you, Lloyd.
Scan this QR code if you haven't already. Scan the QR code and we'll send it to the virtual audience as well. That will, if you have an interest and you want to talk to us about, you've been in this space with around food deserts and food oases, you have something to bring to the table, we want to talk to you. Scan this QR code, is that, but I also want to talk about the collision, which is coming up on August 10th. Baronessa, share with us a little bit about the collision August 10th, what that's about for the audience.
The collision is it's a course that we're offering based on one of our core principles called the Big Idea. Won't get into it too heavy. You'd have to come join us to get the meat of it, but it really deals in a lot of the thought process that we've shared today in terms of how we reimagine even our own thoughts to create and transform the lives that we desire. So August 10th, August 10th is, it's a Saturday, so hopefully that doesn't interfere with anyone's work or businesses. Please come out, join us, definitely connect with us, and it should be a really good time. A real nice, deep, intimate dive.
Thank you. Give a closing remarks from the panelists here on our discussions today. Keisha?
I think we've said, pretty much everything, from points, pivots to portals. One thing that I did think of that always stays in the back of my mind, and hearing everyone's story, is that throughout the points, at every pivot, and through every portal, we still can't forget the experiences that we had during those moments, because they build character, they make us who we are, and it helps us go wherever it is where we're going. It helps us reach the vision. So I think that this discussion was awesome. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to next time. So thank you guys for having me.
I'll just say what's kind of cool is, we take these concepts and we're interested in engaging with you folks about it, but it really is like you guys really bring it to life with your experiences and your ideas and your comments. That's what I think is like super cool. Is like you definitely we can play off a lot from each other, and so anyway, thank you for giving us the opportunity to have that discussion.
So I just want to say thanks for coming out and participating. And as you go about your days, think about the points that you have, whether it be in purpose. I love what you said about that, Miss Kicks. But the points in purpose, or whether it be a point geographically or age, whatever, but how that we tend to pivot. But as we pivot to go in other directions, that we don't anchor. We pivot, we anchor, so that we can't enter the portal. And think about it as it relates to, as Greg brought up, business, because that's what we do. We address points and portals for organizations. And one person is an organization by himself or herself. And then we help them go through the portal, which in the case of business, build revenue, and some other things we do. But as an individual, create the dream that we want to live, whether it's by choice or by chance. And there's been expression of that here. And then lastly, America, like I said, I'm going to go back to this, realizing that it happens more than once. Like you hit a level, and as you mentioned, Sam, but there's more potential above. So it's a continuing process, whether it's publicly, privately or personally, or corporately. So those are my last comments.
Truly is limitless. So, we'll close it out. I know we're a few minutes over. Definitely, again, you can check us. We've got our social media as well, where you can kind of follow along some of the things that we're doing. You can track it there. You can track us there. Our LinkedIn is there as well. So you can do that. Our virtual audience, thank you for attending as well. Please connect with us. We want to engage with you all in the things that we're doing and the things that you're doing. So thank you again. Have a good night.
Good.